Sometimes life's burdens can take their toll on your emotional well-being. If you or a loved one is struggling, know that you are not alone. South Texas Health System Behavioral can help you cope with depression, manage feelings of anxiety, regain control of mood swings, and recover from substance use disorders. Our staff is available 24/7, offering the quality and compassionate inpatient and outpatient care you need to overcome life's challenges. South Texas Health System Behavioral, where your mental health is our priority. Greetings and welcome to our latest Let's Talk Mental Health webinar. I'm Tom Castañeda, the System Director of Marketing and Public Relations for South Texas Health System. On behalf of STHS Behavioral, thank you for joining us. Mental wellness is a foundation for a good life. It helps you cope with stress, build strong relationships, be productive, and realize your potential. Good mental health positively impacts every area of life, from your physical health to your ability to work and connect with others. So to help Rio Grande Valley residents prioritize their mental health, STHS Behavioral hosts these monthly Let's Talk Mental Health webinars. By highlighting common mental health issues and offering strategies to maintain good mental health, we hope to break the stigma surrounding mental health and motivate more people to discuss their own struggles and seek professional help if needed. Now, in this installment, we'll be discussing surviving suicide. Recovering after a suicide attempt is a critical and trying period in a person's life. The emotional after effects can be overwhelming, with a mix of emotions possible. Accepting those feelings is the first step towards healing. Statistically, most people who attempt suicide survive, according to the CDC, and the vast majority won't go on to die by suicide later. But seeking professional help is imperative during the recovery process because it allows an individual to explore and understand the underlying issues that led to the suicide attempt, while offering a safe space to express one's feelings and learn coping strategies. So to learn more about surviving suicide, we're joined by Anival Henriksen, a licensed therapist with STHS Behavioral. Anival, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting. Appreciate it.
Now, this is an important topic because in September we talked about suicide prevention, but unfortunately, suicide still remains a serious issue in the United States and in our community. And according to the statistics, about 700,000 to 1.5 million Americans who attempt a suicide survive. And in the Valley, do you see that the average patient load at STHS Behavioral is very similar? Do you see that there is a large percentage, 90%, that survive an attempt?
Yeah, you're going to see more. We do see a larger group of people that do survive the attempt. For whatever reason, it could be maybe the last second they changed their mind, even though they had the tools readily available with them. Maybe family members stepped in at the right time. Maybe those who did attempt, just a change of thought, change of feelings, they'll call. We've had patients say, I did attempt, but I called 911, got some help to come in and pick me up. Family members, I told my family, they sent the police over to come get me. They took them to the emergency rooms, depending what the attempt was. Mm-hmm. And so we see that. So there's a larger number of people. I don't know if it's going to be like 90, but it's going to be in the 80% up. Mm-hmm. Where they will survive and they will move on. They'll do well. Mm-hmm. For the most part.
And we were talking before the start of the webinar that at STHS Behavioral right now, you would say in one unit, you have maybe about 16 patients in there, and you would say that about all of them have had suicidal ideation and about half have attempted suicide?
I would say about half. Yeah, made an attempt, where there was the thought was there, the tools were there, and out of that actually went through the whole process and actually either took pills, tried to hang themselves. I would say about maybe a good 30-40% of that group would have actually made the attempt.
And in those therapy sessions that you do, those group sessions that you may do, is there a common thread that you see in terms of why they made the attempt?
Well, the common thread is pretty much what we call life stressors. Depending on the individuals, if I have to pick like what are the top topics, relationship issues, a big one. boyfriend broke up with me, girlfriend broke up with me. Then we see family issues, struggling, marriages, where one of the spouse was caught cheating, and then part of the cheating, the leaving, and then the other spouse, and it's usually the woman having to take on the responsibility, being kicked out, not having resources, having the kids. So we see a lot of relationship issues, problem with the immediate family, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, not feeling accepted, not feeling appreciated, not feeling that they're even seen or recognized within the family. They feel invisible for some of them. So we see a lot of that. That would be your larger groups. And then you add then the employment, you start adding unemployment, losing their job. So it changes a little bit. Now, to have somebody want to commit suicide that because of another person, maybe somebody else had done it, that's going to be a little bit smaller.
Okay.
Now, you might see, especially with teens or young adults, you might see you've heard of the suicide pact.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be 2 or 3 people get together, and that's the plan. Again, but it's just for different reasons. They don't like the way the world's going. They don't like the way they're seeing the government's going. So there's a lot of things can be a factor. Anything in our society, anything within our community, anything personal can be a trigger for wanting to commit suicide. Everyone's very individualistic. Everyone has their own issues.
Mm-hmm.
Those are what we're looking for.
And the thing that we always talk about is the importance of hope and having hope. And when it comes to a suicide attempt or even suicidal ideation, it really is the loss of hope. Is that right?
It's loss of hope. But one of the things I want to get people to understand is it's not so much the hope, it's the hurt that comes with it.
Mm-hmm.
They've been hurt. And what's recognizing where that hurt's coming from. When we have patients that are getting emotionally beat up, patients who have a sense of loss is pain, is hurt when they lose a loved one through divorce, losing a job. There's that hurt. Their identity, especially if it's a man, it's a hurt. Pride is tied to hurt. So when we have that hurt, then those issues start to kick in, and that's where you see the thoughts might come in, those experiences. And then it's developing the coping skills, the reasons behind all of that, but it's addressing those issues first.
And it's understanding that underlying issue of what led to the attempt in the first place. So understanding where that hurt is coming from, and that's why therapy, counseling is so important.
Yes, and that's why I encourage patients, when you go out there and look for a therapist, find those that are grounded, that are good, that are comfortable dealing with loss, understand the pain, understand grief, or trauma. We have to get really good at that as therapists, because that's where the essence is, that's where the core is, and that's very interesting. So once we learn to do that as therapists and we become more comfortable, the downside is you see a lot of therapists who may be in the field a while, but they're not comfortable
with the subject matter.
With the subject matter of grief, death, trauma. And maybe, for whatever reasons, they may have their issues, maybe they've dealt with it in their own personal lives, dealing with death, grief, and not how to cope with it. And we're not teaching it as much, in the university level. It's a specialty in itself.
Yeah, but when it comes to any issue that we're discussing, education is key so that we're aware of how to handle a situation, how to prevent it, if something should happen, how we can grow past it. And so you've put together a great presentation for us, so let's get started.
All right. Well, we're going to be looking at suicide from the perspective of how the post, when the person survives, what is going on with them? What's their perspective of what they're dealing with, And we're going to focus on that, but then also we're going to turn around and look at the family perspective being a survivor, all right? And some new terms have popped out in the last few years that we don't see, understanding what a suicide survivor is. A suicide survivor isn't just a individual that just, it falls into 2 categories now. And I'm going to go into a little bit more, but I want to let's talk a little bit about suicide before we get started, because we need to understand, what grief is. And we kind of brushed over a little bit. And grief is that experiencing difficulty coping with everyday loss. The biggest grief mostly people deal with is going to be a loss of a person, a loved one, a family member, a parent, grandparent, a child. But I've worked with patients who the loss of a pet, they take it very hard, and the thing with grief, it's universal. It's not something that's just to one specific group. It's not to one socioeconomic sector. It affects everybody because death is part of life. All right. And we're going to be affected by it. It will touch us. And that's what we want to focus on. Grieving the death of a loved one is never easy for anybody. That's one of the things we're focusing on. What makes suicide very unique is it's basically one of the more harder form of grief to deal with, because when you're dealing with suicide, it's basically described as death is like no other. It's not it wasn't seen for the most part. We didn't expect it. It came out of nowhere. Those are the kind of stuff that we're dealing with when we're focusing with individuals. There's a sense of, if we look at the grieving process, well, death by suicide can be stunning to the individual. It feels like our soul just got crushed, It leaves family and friends not only grieving the unexpected death, but confused and lost because of the process, not seeing it. That's one of the things we hear a lot when we deal with family. I didn't know, I didn't see it. I could have done more, So there's that type of issues that they're dealing with. We have to make sure that we understand that suicide is a tragedy, but also it's a mystery for some of us, like what happened, what's going on. And I think that's where people get stuck. They want to know what was going on in the person's mind. And I think that gets people more in trouble mentally and emotionally, because you'll never know what the right answer is. And that's where we try as therapists try and help them understand. It's like, you cannot hold on to something that we don't know the answer. We don't know what was going on unless there was a letter, unless they left a video recording saying what they're going through. When it's unexpected, we don't see that kind of information. You're playing a guessing game, and that can do more damage to your psyche, more damage to your spirit, more damage to your emotional and mental well-being. So we always want to make sure we want to teach people, don't get caught up on the mystery behind it and try and find answers that you're never going to know. You're never going to find out what the true answer is. And we kind of talked about it real quickly. We talked about sense of hopelessness, but it's a need to stop the hurt, that inability to see solutions to problems or to cope with challenging life circumstances. And that's what we're trying to focus on. And when we talk about some of these things, just real quick, and you kind of touched on it, some statistics. Well, I wrote it down somewhere. I think it was between 2018 to 2022, some studies were showing that about 12.8 million people have seriously thought about it. Out of that group, 3.7 million actually made a plan to commit suicide, and then 1.5 million people attempted to suicide. The most recent study about that, taking that group, we're looking at just in 2023, they said people that have actually died from suicide was close to 50,000. It was actually 49,000 people who had died from suicide, which is basically one death in every 11 minutes. And that's a lot. And that's something that we're trying to change. We're trying to get a better handle on it. But it's still, it's something that's going to be around for a while. It's not something that we're going to, we can look at as an epidemic, we can look at as a pandemic. It's not something that's going to go away. So because there's so many life circumstances that can affect our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, and it's really hard to get a hold of it. So what does it mean to be a survivor of suicide? Survivors of suicide, when I talked about it has different meanings, what we're learning now and talk about how they've changed it up a little bit, we don't look at, when they talk about survivors of suicide, they're looking at two different groups. There's those who have lost a loved one to suicide. So if you're a person that had a family member, a friend, a relative who committed suicide, then you're going to be known as a survivor of a suicide loss. If you're the individual that made the attempt, you're not so much a suicide survivor, but you're basically categorized as an attempt survivor. So it's a little different. So they're kind of changing it to kind of separate a little bit differently, how we approach, how we cope with it, how we educate and provide therapy. So when we look at it, we're focusing on the, oops, one too many. Sorry about that. We're going to be talking about the survivor, the attempt, the individual who survived an attempt of suicide. For them, the experience is often characterized by a complete mix of intense and shifting emotions. There's a lot of turmoil going on, a lot of hurt that they're trying to resolve. They're trying to find some solutions, and they get so exasperated, they get so lost in the chaos. Sometimes the final resort will be to hurt themselves, to kill themselves, to end it. But the other part of it too is a challenge of recovery. How do we recover from it? Those who have survived an attempt, and finding a renewed sense of purpose and hope. And so we're going to kind of break that down and look at it from those perspectives. So when we talk about complex emotions, we're going to be looking at the immediate aftermath of a suicide attempt, which is basically the experiencing the wide range of intense feelings, and it's not linear. So it's not like A, B, C, D, or E. It's not like, in fact, my wife had this conversation with me. She says, well, let me help her understand, because she went through my material and she always asks questions. It's like, so you have to go through these stages. And she was talking about a friend at church, and yeah, you have to experience all these emotions, the process of loss. I go, it's not linear. In fact, just a little history, Kubler-Ross never created the 5 stages to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In fact, when she passed the torch to now who's the guru in our country now, which is David Kessler, who's now the foremost expert on loss and grief, he's actually added a 6. And if you go out there and you go on the internet, you'll find some therapists are now looking at, or experts are adding a 7th or 8th. So she actually created the 5 stages to be a living process as we move forward. And so you can be stuck in any particular area. So you may skip numbness or shock and all and go straight to anger. A person of faith will jump over and they may start experiencing acceptance. They're comfortable with their faith, they accept it. So it's just very different. So there's no 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just a guide to help us process, to help the individual when we're doing therapy with them, and to help the therapist understand the emotional range that they can go through in the experiences. So when we talk about some of these things, one of the things one of the emotions they may experience is relief and hope. Well, I got a second chance of life. Good example, we had a patient a couple of months back, came in, tried to hang himself. Trying to make sure I stay in English because I almost went into Spanish on me and you all. The tree branch broke. He had the rope and everything. He was ready to go. The branch broke. And he goes, he thought it was a sturdy branch, but then I think the family says the tree was too old, so it was already dead. So, he took it as a sign from God. So he said, it kind of gave him after he with us, he said, I think I found some more purpose. God has a plan for me. So helping them stay on that track. So sense of hope, sense of relief. Part of that burden lifted. They're not alone now. They're getting help. So I think that was part of it, because especially with men, we're more not likely to go get help. We're not going to go talk about our problems, but once they're with us and they see the other men are there, they see the male therapists, they see some of the male staff, and then they're able to share, and they're more comfortable sharing with other men. Then they're able to recognize, like, yeah, it's okay to share. They're not alone in the process. So there's that relief, the burden lifted. But they still deal with the disappointment and shame. My life's falling apart and I can't even kill myself. I'm a failure. There could be some guilt involved. After the fact, how's my family going to see me? Are they going to treat me the same? Are they going to be more careful? Are they going to be more angry with me? The biggest part, especially we see in men, is that sense of failure. The kids are gonna look at them like, I failed you, you know. And one of the things we notice is family can be very supportive. Just it's that negativity that we've taught ourselves. So disappointment and shame is really big. And then you're dealing with the stigmatism of our society, you know, within religious groups, you know, especially like the Catholic Church for the longest time, you know, and a lot of Christian churches believe suicide was, you're going straight to hell, you know, and that was taught for the longest time. In fact, that really changed, I think, back in the early 80s. The church started recognizing the psychology, the hurt, the pain. So when now it's like the church doesn't teach you go to hell because of suicide, you know. But as a therapist, and if I find it interesting, we still have individuals who still believe that's what the church teaches. Well, I'm not going to correct you if you come and say, well, my faith, my belief in God and the church teaches I'm going to hell. No, let's hang on to it. I will not correct you at that point, you know. So we encourage, you know, help people find in their faith. But there's that stigmatism, you know, that there's something wrong with you. If it's a man, you're not man enough. You're not strong enough, you know. So it's really hard. With women, they do have the shame, but I think the shame's gonna be a little bit different. It's not so much the success, it's just the shame of like, I gotta keep going on, stay still. And especially when we're dealing with relationships, maybe there's some spousal abuse, domestic abuse, and I couldn't get out of it. And the shame of having to be there and how people will see them. Still confusion and anger. The struggle to understand what led them to that point, what was going on, the feeling confused, angry at themselves, the circumstances. And I find that really interesting because like in our unit, especially in the hospital setting, as long as I've been there and as long as I've been dealing with individual suicide, the attempt might be serious. They might even have been hospitalized. They might even have stitches, might have their stomach pumped, induced vomiting, whatever experience they went through. But when they come in, it's almost like, well, I didn't mean to. Well, something happened that time. So it's trying to get them to understand and be, not to minimize what they did or brush it off, like, you know, because that shame, that confusion, like I didn't succeed, going back to the stigmatism that kind of ties into it, because I'm a failure, but no, I'm fine now, and I need to get back out there. So that's really hard for a lot of people. And the other part is sometimes they may still have those underlying thoughts. It won't go away. They're stuck with it. They're still obsessing. That's one of the things we have to do in the hospital setting. Sometimes we get patients, they minimize the seriousness. They want to leave after 1 or 2 days, and we're like, you took pills. And then usually I have to sit there and say, has anything changed at home? You came here because your husband was beating you. You're dealing with domestic issues. You lost your job. What's changed when you walk out of here today? Nothing. So then we got to be realistic. So let's get you the right tools. Let's get you set up. Let's get you the right services. You know, so sometimes, you know, it's not beg or plead, but it's just getting the patient to understand, give us a chance. Let's really help you. So that you can succeed and be a survivor. Because we do look at survivor as a success, you know, and I let them know, you survived for a reason. Let's make sure you stay that. Don't be a victim. Let's be a survivor. So we really push that. Some of the challenges we see in recovery, and I think this is really important because when we talk about recovery, we're focusing on, it's a difficult journey with specific challenges. And why I say I find that interesting, because when I do group and we talk about issues and concerns, you know, why my life is like that, and we get so hung up on all the negativity, I have to remind patients, have you ever looked at life from a perspective of, it's a journey, it's basically like a treasure hunt of learning who I am. But I really focus on the journey, and a journey is not always perfect. It's going to have its ups and downs. It's going to have its traps. It's going to have its losses. We're going to run into people in our life that are going to be very supportive. There are going to be times we're going to be alone on this journey. What am I learning about myself on this journey? So it's helping them process that your life is a journey. It hasn't ended yet. Don't rush it, but expect the unexpected. Look at journey, look at life as an adventure. Then it changes the mentality, it changes my perspective, it changes how I proceed, and that, you know what, it's a small setback. because we all deal with setback. If we have the mentality of like life is a journey, well, yeah. Did it go exactly? You know, if I sit there and ask, you know, yourself or ask any of your staff, is this what you were going to? Was this what you're planning to do from the day you were born or when you were 5? You know, like what's changed? You know, what brought you here? And is this where you see yourself? Or you see yourself eventually? Who knows where you're going? You see, so I think that's what we have to teach patients too. And so in the process is part of the challenge in the recovery is getting past that stigmatism, the isolation. Because I think that's one of the biggest things we do notice, isolating. It's always interesting for parents, you know, especially those with mental illness, well, they're always in the room, but they're still isolating. So somewhere in there, what are their processes? What are they thinking? What kind of music they're listening to? You know, little tricks to help them get a little bit better to understand their loved ones. And part of the stigmatism, it's hard to talk about it. How are you going to see me? Are you going to see me as somebody that's human still, or somebody that's a quitter, a loser? Can't even get that right. So it hurts, you know. So it really makes the healing process harder to proceed. Okay. Then there's the physical healing. Well, what did you do to yourself? How serious was the injury? You know, we've seen cases where they try to shoot themselves, man. And because of, especially in the head, now they have some, not so much brain damage, but they did some trauma to the brain. So now they're not functioning as they used to. There may be slurred speech, numbness, or inability to use part of their limbs, or loss of limbs because of the attempt, the scar. You know, especially if somebody tried to hang themselves. Cutters, you know, depending how deep it is and what kind of stitches were used and how deep, you know, the deeper the cut, the bigger the scar is going to show. So there's that, the physical healing. We're dealing also with the post-traumatic stress of the event. You know, for the individual, like, will they have a relapse? Will a certain song that caused it, will they start having nightmares, reliving? And when we talk about post-traumatic, that because I failed, because I got so scared, because I gave up, and those things start coming back. And like in our field, we have individuals who deal with psychosis, auditory visual hallucinations. Well, that can exacerbate those hallucinations, the auditory commands. So the voices might get more profound, saying things to them to hurt themselves, putting them down. They might start seeing images of maybe family members who've already gone before them, tell them, come on over, you can still make it. So we deal with that part of it too, but in general, we're just looking at just the trauma, the experience, the pain that went with it, and can it be triggered again? And then navigating relationships. That is so hard for individuals, especially post. Am I going to be accepted? Do I have to be more careful? Am I going to be followed by my family members? Always checking on me. Oh, you know, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to the bathroom. Oh, okay. And then let's say they try to commit suicide. They took the pills in the bathroom, or they try to cut themselves in the tub. Well, it's going to make it harder to go to the bathroom by yourself. You know, the family's going to be thinking that, and you're going to be wondering, well, will they trust me? Will they trust me to go outside by myself, go for a run, go for a ride? So you're dealing with those type of issues. Will you still love me for having these thoughts? Because for some of the individuals, they may have these thoughts for years before they even make an attempt. It's just thoughts that never go away. You know, so can you still love me for having these thoughts? Will you still appreciate me, or will you quit? Will you abandon me? Will you walk away? So those are issues that we try and help them understand and process, and it's helping them find a good support system to help them feel better about themselves, helping them help them navigate. And that's the idea. How do we navigate relationships? And it's really hard to navigate relationships if you're already in a broken relationship. And that's why it's really hard when we deal with individuals who say, I'm ready to leave. I've only been here 2 days, but I'm ready to leave. But you're going back to a violent family, broken home. You're homeless. there's not a lot of support when you're homeless, and we do have patients that come in homeless with suicidal thoughts. So that's what we try and help them navigate and understand. Okay, so that's what we're getting at. But then hopefully the goal is to help them move forward, find hope again, moving forward, helping them recognize that there is a path to healing, that you can succeed, that you can make it. It's just finding the right help and not being afraid to take the chance. When the hands reach toward you, take it. So part of that hope and moving forward, we kind of talked about earlier, is that sense of finding purpose after all of this. So survivors can become advocates for other individuals who have gone through the process. They might go and develop some skills or passion, like maybe get more serious about the work they're doing, maybe change their job to something that's more service type careers where they're giving back to the community, helping individuals to understand suicide better, become speakers, share their stories. The other part of hope and purpose is finding connection, sharing their stories with individuals. They can be in support groups, through public advocacy, sharing, being a spokesperson for other individuals to help them fight those demons, to want to help them, that put them in that spot to where they might hurt others or hurt themselves, especially hurt themselves, It's a sense of helping them feel like they're not alone. And it is interesting because when we get the clients come in, our patients come in for suicidal ideations and they start talking about it in group, it's interesting to watch how they're surprised, and they'll come talk to me later, or I've heard from my other partners. Yeah, they're actually surprised that there's other people that have the same thoughts, that they're not alone in their suicidal thoughts or their attempts. So it's kind of self-awareness. It helps them feel better. It's not as scary. So they're not alone in the process. The other part too we talk about is getting professional help. Part of that moving forward and finding hope. Getting connected with therapists, getting connected if you're dealing with depression, talking to a psychiatrist, getting whether it's outpatient, inpatient, skills programs, one-on-one. It's just getting that crucial help, especially if it's more serious than, and if it's not just a one-time event, but if we're seeing multiple attempts, if we're seeing years of these habits of suicidal attempts becoming more and more prevalent in your life, not being able to let go, then get the help, especially with chronic depression. Then if you have a mental illness, you want to make sure you stay on top of that. I think the stigmatism is most of our patients, they start taking meds, they start feeling better after a few weeks, especially if it's antidepressants, they stop. And sometimes we have to teach them, like, well, you have a mental disorder, it's probably going to be lifelong. Just like somebody with diabetes, high blood pressure, you're going to be on medication for the rest of your life. You may have great sugars, your blood pressure may be great, but it's called maintenance because you're doing everything right. Exercising, socializing, eating right, changing your diet, those little things that helps you live longer. Well, the same thing kind of plays in with mental illness. You have to look at your mental illness as a legit medical issue, and if you treat it as such, you can live a long, healthy life because of it. So it's a team approach. So seeking professional help, and also a different perspective or a new perspective of how they see life. We get those that, because of the suicide attempt, they feel like a failure, and because nothing's changed in their world, the issues that brought them in are still very evident. They're very, very strong. The abusive relationships, the unsupportive family, the isolation. If that doesn't change, well, we're going to fall into those old traps again. But for those people, they actually find a new purpose. They find a new perspective. They see that life is worth living for whatever reasons. And let's say that gentleman who found his faith helped him, thinking God pulled him out of it, now seeing him succeeding because he found his purpose to share others and to keep others from making the same mistake he made, or to show that there is hope besides these thoughts. This is having somebody to talk to. So that's what we're talking about, a new perspective. Now we're going to be looking at it from a perspective of family and friends for those of us who have lost. And I think everyone knows somebody who has committed suicide, whether a neighbor, friend, but I think all of us, some might have somebody that's hit closer to home. I don't know if it's as high or if it's a little different, but it might be a little, since I can remember, especially I knew people who commit suicide in high school. I knew a few friends that committed suicide when I was in college. Guys who were solid, people who had it together. As I had family members who attempted or tried to kill, or who had succeeded, so who have committed suicide. So it does affect us all and how we respond, okay? And so I think everyone will be affected at some time in their life of knowing somebody who has committed suicide. The closer they are to home is how are you going to deal with it? How do I survive it? So again, it deals with a lot of complex and intense grieving process, which is also marked by unique challenges that go beyond typical bereavement, okay? You're looking at key aspects, which might include tumultuous range of emotions, significant psychological, physical risks, and social isolation due to the stigmatism. And I think that's the big one. The stigmatism is the one that seems to just bugs everybody. It's just one of those, doesn't matter who you are, we deal with stigmatism. You're dealing with stigmatism, just not just the mental health, but you're adding the part about the suicide. And it's looked down upon, it's not, which is interesting. Nobody looks down on anybody because you have diabetes. Nobody looks down on you or makes fun of you because you have high blood pressure. But you mentioned mental illness, you mentioned suicide. Oh man, there's something wrong with you. No one ever says there's something wrong with you because you have diabetes. It's just weird how we look at it from a different perspective. So talk about educating the community and family. So some of the common experiences and feelings: shock and disbelief. Wondering, especially when it's a violent type of suicide, gunshot, hanging, throwing themselves off a building or running into traffic. When it's something that intense, that graphic, it causes a lot of emotional upheaval. It just affects, you'll see emotional numbness. It makes it difficult to process the reality of the loss, especially when we're feeling numb. Guilt and self-blame, that's where, again, we teach it though, you can't play the what ifs. What have I done this? Could I have done something different? I should have been more present. You're going to beat yourself up if you do that. There's no winning in that battle. It just makes it harder and harder. So it's dealing with the guilt and the self-blame and teaching individuals you cannot blame yourself. If a person wants, and that's not the hardest part, if a person truly wants to end their life, they will do it. You cannot take any fault for what they're going through. All right? Anger, rejection. If you're starting to see a theme, it's like the stages, the grieving stages. Well, there is anger, there's resentment. And who's the anger geared at? Well, usually at the person for quitting on the family, for not being there. You're leaving me alone. Now you leave, especially when you live with family, it's a brother who commits suicide, and then you have the siblings saying you're leaving me to deal with mom and dad and the craziness. They felt abandoned. You were my support system. You were my partner in crime, and you abandoned me. So we deal with those. Then we talk about anger at God. Those who have a religious belief or thought they have a religious belief may affect their faith, their understanding of who they are as a faithful person, and they start attacking God, blaming Him. Like, why didn't He let it happen? And my other one is you also see within family blaming each other. Why didn't you do a better job? Had you not been so mean? And even blaming themselves for, like, I shouldn't have been mean to him that morning. So we gotta be real careful with that anger and rejection, dealing with confusion, need for answers. That's where we talk about that why. Why did he do it? What was going on through his mind? Again, you're never going to win that discussion. You never find the true answers. You never know what the why is unless they actually wrote or left a message for you. Without that, you're never going to know. So you have to find a point. We try and get the family to that point where it's like, you got to find a point where you got to just let it go. It happened. How do we move forward from here? Again, shame and stigma. How are people going to see me? How does society treat it? It's interesting how different societies react differently. If you look at some of the Asian countries, Japan, China, you fail, you're expected to commit suicide. It's the honor, suicide is an honorable thing. Here, it's an unhonorable thing. We don't quit. We don't give up. We get up and bounce back. So we look at things differently, but yet in some societies, suicide is a normal thing. It's okay. It's almost honorable. So we gotta be careful where we're at. And then as a therapist, it's even harder because when we have such a mixed melting pot here in the U.S. of different cultures, we have to respect that. In my brain, I can't put my head around the thought of suicide is honorable, but if it helps a family member comprehend, say, well, it was honorable that he died by suicide, so he's no longer a burden to the family. And you hear that from the older generations. Younger generations, especially growing up here, will not have that, but you have that confliction. So there's that stigmatism. Isolation, just want to be by themselves, want to be alone, because I'm still processing what happened to my family member. I'm still processing the death of my wife. I'm processing, my best friend killing himself. So we will tend to isolate and ponder, and then in that isolation, we might start doubting ourselves. And another part that it's relief, the relief that, well, maybe they're in a better place. Relief that the struggle is no longer there for them, so they found some peace now. The harder one to deal with relief are the ones who feel guilty because of the relief. I'm glad they're gone. They're no longer a burden. We no longer have to take care of them. We no longer have to deal with the psychosis or the voices or the anger or the bitterness. So there's a sense of guilt that they're processing in that moment for themselves, which makes it very hard. So a sense of guilt because I'm relieved they died. So we focus on challenges and impacts. So how do we move forward from here? Well, I think the challenging part about being a survivor of a person who committed suicide is the physical and mental health risks. Suicide loss survivors are at a higher risk for major depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, physical ailments, because we might start having difficulty sleeping. We may develop some anxiety and we think it's maybe a panic attack. And with time, some of those things can turn into something more serious, especially when we're isolating, we're processing, we're not eating right, we're not engaging in exercising, we're not getting the sleep. And so we really want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves physically and mentally. We got to continue to stay strong, and that's why it's real good if you have a good support family, a good support system. That'll help you with the process better. And then we deal with part of the other issue they deal with is what we call the painful reminders. Their birthday's coming up. What are we going to do? How do we take care of it? How do we help mom process? Because my brother passed away and mom's still having a hard time. Right now, look at the season. We just finished Halloween. We're getting into Thanksgiving. Well, this is going to be the first Thanksgiving my loved one's not going to be here. This is going to be the first Christmas they're not going to be here. The first New Year. So that's going to be hard for family members to deal with, to cope with, to navigate. And so it's helping them understand all that, and it's going to change how we celebrate the holidays. Do we change traditions? Do we do things differently? I've seen families who, especially when they pass away during the holiday, especially Christmas, one of the family members will stop celebrating Christmas because they gave up, because that was the time that hurt the most for them. So they may not celebrate Christmas. It's one thing to not celebrate maybe that year or for 2 years, but then it becomes more serious when we're seeing 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, and they still don't celebrate, so they haven't processed the loss. So we want to help them do that. And then we're dealing with secondary loss. because as a survivor, we may experience loss of companionship, especially if it's a loved one. That was my husband that killed himself. That was my wife. That was my parent. That was my child. So they're no longer there. So that companionship. Because let's say it was due to financial reasons, the person committed suicide. So now it's going to affect the family financially. The stability of the home is going to be affected. Are we able to pay the bills? Are we able to make the rent? So those are going to be some other issues. And then sometimes even a sense of safety and the way they see the world can be affected. They might start seeing more trauma in the world. They might see more bad things happening because that's all they're focusing on. They may have a sense of maybe I'm not safe. Maybe I might be having some mental disorder. I may become depressed. So a sense of safety is going to be affected as well. But like in all things, we're looking for healing and coping. And in the process of healing and coping, again, it's a nonlinear process that takes time. There's no right way to grieve. Everyone has to have their own style of grieving. But part of the healing and coping is something as simple as seeking a support group. And there's several support groups, even here in the Valley. A lot of the hospitals will have a grieving support group, you know, for loss, for suicide, for those who have lost family members of suicide. There's groups, you know, just I know in the community you can find some support groups. So just going out there and looking for it. And wonderful thing about the internet now, you can Google it and you'll find a support group that can help you process all this. Self-care. Cannot stop taking care of ourselves, and this is going to go across both boards. Those who have attempted suicides, who are suicide attempt, or those who are family members who survived a suicide. We got to maintain self-care. We got to take care of ourselves. We got to make sure we try and get back our sleep. Try and make sure we're eating, walking, socializing, engaging. So we have to make sure we're doing those things, and make sure not to turn down those opportunities to spend a little bit of time with friends and family who offer it. Again, with family, finding meaning. Because of the suicide, we've seen support groups develop. We've seen walkathons for suicide victims, stuff like that. We find a new perspective as a family member, how we can help, how we can process, a sense of empathy. We're going to be more aware, and especially with our other family members who are still alive, maybe our friends, we're going to be more empathetic to what's going on and what they're feeling, little things that we see happening differently. And patience. I think that's one of the hardest things dealing with survivors. They need to be patient with themselves and others. Acknowledging that everyone grieves differently and the setbacks are going to be normal. So allowing the person to process, to vent, to cry, to laugh, to share stories. But we have to be patient. Everyone's going to be at their own pace, their own time. Again, it's always going to be equivalent to how close they were to the individual or any other. That's usually the first thing we look at. How close they are, they're going to take it harder. So it may take a little bit more time. And that's how we process these issues. And like with everything else, we want to make sure we're reaching out to as many people. We want to make sure they understand what's out there for the community, how to help them survive better. And what I love about it now is that you can call or text 988. I remember 20 years ago you had to dial 800, what. You had to memorize it. It's like, that's just way too many numbers. I think we finally got it together, just dial 988. It's a suicide hotline. To talk to somebody, to get the right help, to start getting the assistance. I call it, one of the things we do with our patients, I do a whole thing about when we're dealing with these storms, when we're dealing with these activities, we got to find what we call buffaloes in our lives. And the reason we say buffaloes is because buffaloes have this unique gift when there's a storm coming. And all of us deal with storms with ourselves. Buffaloes, unlike a lot of other creatures, don't run away from the storm. They actually turn around and they'll do one of two things. One, they might stay there as a herd, stand there, but they're facing the storm. And they only do that usually because they just had, it was the season where the baby calves were born. So they're too small to run into the storm. So they'll stand there, and then all the big buffaloes are in the herd, and they put the baby buffaloes between them. Who are our buffaloes? Who is our support system? Who's protecting us? Who's going to stand by me? And then the goal is to be like the herd of the buffalo. As the year goes on, the rainy season comes and the storms come, and they actually run into the storm. They face their storms, and we're trying to teach our patients, especially those who have suicide thoughts, we got to face those demons, those hurts. But you got to find those buffaloes that will help you run with you and guide you and be with you. And this is just one example of a buffalo, the 988. You can use the 988lifeline.org. Family or buffalo. You find those people that are going to be there to stand with you. So don't be afraid to reach out and get the help. I think that's pretty much all I got. I don't know what else I can give you. I mean, it's like
no, that was some great information there, and the terms, as you mentioned, the survivor of suicide, so someone who survives losing a person who has taken their life, and then an attempt survivor is someone who survived the attempt. So those are good to know and terms that are important to know. But when it comes to either, I think survival is possible and recovery is achievable, especially for someone who has made an attempt.
Yes.
It's important to know that. And data suggests that less than 5% of attempts in a given year are fatal. So that's why it's really important to know that recovery is possible, but recovery is going to be a long road.
Yes, because we don't know how long they've been feeling this way. We don't know what was the initial hurt. If you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with a history of depression, a history of trauma, a history of abuse, it's going to take longer. The best example, especially with our patients, I'll tell them, like, it's not so much suicide, but if you're dealing with sexual assault, now I'm not going to negate it's terrible, but if you have a 10-year-old or two 14-year-old young ladies who are sexually assaulted, but then the difference is this one barely wasn't true assault. They might have gotten knocked down. They tried to touch them. This was a first experience. Very traumatizing, not negating, very hurtful, a lot of the feelings are going to be there. They meet all the criteria. But as opposed to another 14-year-old who was sexually assaulted, raped as a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, they're 14. They've been sexually assaulted several times. It's a family member, Well, who's going to be easier to recover quicker? So, so it's so the rule of thumb has always been, however long it's taking you to become depressed, to have basically the storm, how long has that storm been brewing? You need to take about half that much of time to recover, and it's using the same intensity. In other words, if you're doing this every day for the last 10 years of beating yourself up, you need at least 5 years of every day of
loving on yourself.
Loving yourself, taking care of yourself. And you're not even going to love yourself, it's just learning to not be hard on yourself, learning to, I'm okay today. You know what? I can appreciate who I am. You know what? I like myself. And eventually learn to love yourself. So you're talking, but with the same intensity. So, okay, do you have 5 years where you can be wonderful to yourself every day? And that's the hard part. And for some reason, we don't do that. It's easier to hate ourselves, to beat ourselves up. And that's where so a lot of our patients, so sometimes the suicide may not have been there in the beginning, but if you're already going, 5 years, 10 years, you're in your third marriage or third relationship and you're still getting beat up and you finally gave up, That's the stuff we're talking about cleaning up. So it is it's hard and it's very difficult.
And when it comes to the steps to aid in the recovery process, having self-compassion and patience is really essential.
Yes. Self-compassion, it's what I teach is, it's hard for patients to understand self-compassion, self-care. So I tell them the best way you can do is, and I say, can you love yourself? Well, do you love yourself today? No. Do you like yourself? No. Can you appreciate who you are? Sometimes I still got to know. Can you at least put up with yourself? So let's get you to, can you at least be gentle? And I found that most of the group will be like, can you not be hard on yourself? I can do that. Yeah, so let's not be hard. So that's that self-care. So let's start with, let's not be hard on ourselves, and let's work our way to let's be gentle. And eventually we can learn to love ourselves, that self-care. So it's those little things, plus the little things we do. So if you can't be hard on yourself, and we don't want you to be hard on yourself, what can you do differently? You know what? I'm gonna go out and say hi to people. You know, I'm just gonna go to the store. I haven't done that in a while. Instead of isolate, self-care. I'm gonna eat a little bit better. You know what? I'm gonna go work out. What I find wonderful is that we have such a good mix of patients that come in. Some of them are very talented. You know, like I love some of their artwork. It's like it's very unique. I go, why don't you draw? Well, I lost the will. No, even then, you know, and I'll give them a subject matter. I say, draw what you're feeling. And it's interesting what they come up with. Like, so it can be very therapeutic. And then eventually they say, okay, so now what would happiness look like for you if you were to draw it out? They might struggle, but this is what it would look like. Okay, so just the fact that they're able to get back to doing something they enjoy.
Yes.
So that's the idea of self-care. Whatever it is that you used to enjoy, things that, and it's baby steps. It could be just playing cards with the kids, playing cards with your family. Something that can just bring you a little bit of, get your mind off of what's going on and just be in the here and now.
Now, when it comes to surviving a suicide attempt, how important is that safety plan that you create for yourself and for your loved ones, and who should have a copy of it? What should go in it, and who should have a copy?
It should be the patient, and depending on the patient themselves, the family can get access. We can give them a copy, let them know. We talk about what the safety plan is. Here, in since we're a hospital setting, for us, it's going to be what's for sure, definitely what's happening in the home. It does start with one of the things we ask is if they have attempted, the tools, are they still at home? Medication, well, what are you going to do for the medication? Are you going to lock it up? Are you going to make sure you're the one handing them out to the patient for a while until you feel comfortable enough where he says, I'm fine, I can take it myself, or or at least supervise them taking their medication? Weapons, knives, how do we, you know, so so we always want to make sure that part's taken care of. And then we add are you going to help them keep their appointments? We can set up appointments, whether if they already have a psychiatrist, somebody in the private sector, or if they need assistance, such as Tropical Texas Behavioral Center, great resource, especially for those that can't afford to be getting psychiatric help or counseling or case management. So depending on the need where you're at, they can offer assistance. They do have programs. So that's part of the safety plan and keeping up with it. We started something new within the year. We have the intensive outpatient. So that's another process. So for those who are dealing with that safety net, because the problem we have is once you leave us, we're a hospital. So we're short term, you know, we're basically the emergency room of mental health. We just stabilize you, we give you just enough tools, we get you the appointments, the rest is up to you. Well, now we have an intensive outpatient that allows you to have that 3 days a week where you can go there for half a day, you know, about 4 hours, and continue getting group, individual, that support, and especially to help you make sure especially when you do get discharged, you have an appointment with your psychiatrist, with Tropical within the week. Well, if you're with us already, and we're talking like if you do leave our program, you're starting IOP usually that week. Also, like, you know, it's usually, I think it's Monday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. You're discharged on a Monday, you're here on Tuesday. If you're discharged on Tuesday, you're going to be here in the program on Thursday. You're already starting the process, so you don't feel alone. And it's only half a day. The problem we have is that commitment from the patient and the family to follow through with it. But we have seen success. For me to walk out there and I see my patient and it's a repeater, but he's actually not repeating with us, he's actually attending IOP. It's like, hey, and to see the change, to see the affect, to see the smile, it's really unique. You know, it's really wonderful feeling that they're doing it and they're making it because they have a supportive family. They're taking care of themselves, and that's the goal.
And the important thing is that there are a lot of resources that are available. So if you are struggling, you are a survivor of suicide, an attempted suicide survivor, or you're a survivor of suicide, or you're a family member who needs to understand and help and be supportive, there are resources that are available. I know that the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration has a Journey Towards Health and Hope. It's a PDF that you can download off of their website that has a lot of really great information. It talks about the safety plan. It talks about the importance of taking your medication, of protecting your physical health, exercise, diet, all of those things. So it is a great guide. It's about 20, 30 pages, but it's really great information. So as we wrap up, Anival, what would be your final key takeaway that you want to tell anyone who is watching?
The final key, especially, again, the self-care, you gotta just don't be hard on yourself and find your buffaloes. I love that. I teach it everywhere. You gotta find those people that are gonna be with you, either standing with you facing the storm, or they're gonna start walking and running with you toward the storm. You gotta find that support. If you have that with you, you'll be surprised how far you will go. And the goal is, and I teach them. And as a buffalo, you might be a baby buffalo, but you're gonna be a big buffalo. So you're gonna start having to help other little buffaloes face their storms. And I think when they see it from that perspective, I think it changes their mindsets. Like, so don't be hard, be gentle, and find yourself some good buffaloes to walk with.
Find your buffalo. That is a great way to end this. So thank you so much, Anival, for your time. We really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Appreciate it.
And that officially concludes our webinar. We thank you for joining us. We hope you will continue to prioritize your mental health and the mental health of your loved ones. If you are experiencing a mental health challenge, STHS Behavioral can help. The facility has served the South Texas community for more than 30 years, offering inpatient and outpatient treatment options. If you or a loved one is experiencing a mental health issue, you can schedule a confidential assessment by calling our hotline at 956-388-1300. Now, please remember that you are not alone. Speak with a loved one or seek professional help if you need emotional or mental health support. And if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, I urge you to call the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. Licensed counselors are available to speak with you in English and Spanish 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, don't miss our next installment of this Let's Talk Mental Health series on Thursday, December 4th, broadcast live at 5:30 p.m. via Facebook as we discuss seasonal depression. We hope you can join us. And to watch our previous Let's Talk seminars, all you have to do is visit sthsletstalk.com. Until our next webinar, stay healthy, stay safe, and please continue to prioritize your mental well-being.
Sometimes life's burdens can take their toll on your emotional well-being. If you or a loved one is struggling, know that you are not alone. South Texas Health System Behavioral can help you cope with depression, manage feelings of anxiety, regain control of mood swings, and recover from substance use disorders. Our staff is available 24/7, offering the quality and compassionate inpatient and outpatient care you need to overcome life's challenges. South Texas Health System Behavioral, where your mental health is our priority.